your thoughts on affordable housing and keeping younger people in the MWV. Okay, this is a huge piece. This is a huge problem. We will be having a forum with the Mount Washington Valley Housing Coalition on Wednesday and discussing this specific issue. At this point, we've got to look at this. This is a very complex issue in the Mount Washington Valley that has really shifted in the last 12 years, since 2008 forward. And the main driver that we're running into right now is a lack of inventory. And when I say a lack of inventory, I mean a lack of inventory for rentals, long-term rentals, because goodness knows we all have a short-term rental next to us, in front of us, behind us, beside us. They're shooting off fireworks at 2 o'clock in the morning. They're throwing raging parties in the middle of Corona, and we're just sitting there going, oh my goodness. So there's rentals, but where'd all the long-term rentals go? A friend of mine, Hannah Schneider, she had a rental down here in the village. A rental that was a long-term that she put a whole bunch of time and money into refinishing. She rented it out to a couple. They didn't pay their rent. That happens. I'm not for kicking people out of a house in the middle of the winter. That's not safe in this environment. And there are laws that protect against that. However, when she let the people know that she wasn't going to renew their lease, they destroyed her house. Over $10,000 worth of damage, plus the loss of rent, plus the time to fight them, plus the legal fees to pay for a lawyer to try and recoup her money. Guess what she's doing with that house? She's turning it into a short-term rental. Boom, another one off the market. That's a huge problem. That's a huge problem. So part of my plan would be to, and I say plan because with 400 plus representatives, you have less than 0.25% of the vote. It's about building relationships and building coalitions to fight for things. So part of that concept that I embrace is that we need to find some way to protect the homeowner, to entice them back into the long-term rental market, which at this point is more risky and less beneficial to them on the money side. So how do we make it so they want to rent out long-term? I don't know, property taxes. Everybody's concerned about that. Maybe if they go short-term, they go that. You know, maybe if the short-term it's higher, maybe if it's long-term, it's lower. I don't know. And anybody who's going to stand up and say, I have a 100% solution, they're feeding you a line, because with 400 plus people to talk onto your idea, no one person has the solution. No one person. So on top of that inventory of long-term rentals and trying to shift some of those short-term rentals back over, I was speaking with the owner of the Wentworth Inn and the owner of the Christmas Tree Farm, or Christmas, I get them messed up. There's so many Christmas places in town. So up in Jackson, and we were talking about how the short-term rental market affects them, and the fact that a lot of these places are going under the table. They're paying wages to the cleaning crews that don't include taxes, don't include those pieces that have to go to the state as far as Social Security and other protection pieces, and that's drawing down from their staff. So they can't find staff to come in and work on certain weekends and certain days of the week, because they're working under the table somewhere else for more money with no benefits and no coverage and no protections, while that homeowner down out of state or a big conglomerate is collecting all of that cash and not putting any of it back into the area. So one of the things they brought up was the fact that, especially in Bartlett and some of the other towns, that the state of New Hampshire does not have a definition for what is a short-term rental. If you take a look at Truckee, California, right? Truckee's a ski town. Vail is looking at the same problem we are. This is a problem that we have in resort towns across America since the advent of Airbnbs and short-term rentals. If you take a look at those pieces, Truckee has decided to define what a short-term rental is. They've decided that, hey, if you rent out more than 12 times in a year, that's a short-term rental. They're going to hold them to a standard and make them be inspected for safety. Have maximum occupancy limits on those houses. I'm not one for government overreach and intervention. But when we've got 40 people down in the village in one house, throwing a rager till 2 in the morning, yeah, we need to reel that in a little bit. So trying to define what a short-term rental is so that the municipalities do not have to worry about being sued by an out-of-state entity. Let's take that fight from the state level. Let's define what a short-term rental is. That should be something else that brings it back in. If you've got a license for that short-term rental and it is a nuisance property because you keep renting out to the same group of meatheads and they just keep throwing that same party. Boom, 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 3 strikes, man. All right, you've lost your license. You can no longer short rent this out. So there are means that other communities have taken to shape that environment. The next thing we need to talk about is construction. When we built our home up on Dundee Road, we paid less than $110 per square foot because we did a lot of the work ourselves as far as earthwork because I had those skills from the military. We pulled our own electrical wire and then had an electrician come in and do it. My wife was up on the ladder painting everything. I designed it. She got to pick the palette. It's beautiful. It's not my decision. She's got the eye for color. But my in-laws, my grandparent in-laws, and they're building a house down in the village. And the starting price today is over $200 per square foot. It is almost doubled in 7 years. That's insane. And on top of that, the wait isn't a few weeks or a month. If you want a local firm to do it, you can't build it until next spring. Wow. $200 a foot, plus you're waiting. Material costs, after talking to Paul Pearson, who's one of the local construction guys, told me that the cost of a 2x4 has almost doubled since COVID began. That's not something we can affect, okay? That's a supply and demand issue. When COVID hit, people shut down the factories, they shut down the production. And by shutting down that production, man, now we have a shortage. Well, supply and demand, folks, supply and demand. Tariffs, bringing stuff in, that hurts us when we're trying to build construction. So how do we solve that problem? I don't know. Maybe if I'm on that military veterans and federal affairs, I can talk to Gene Shaheen. I can talk to Pappas or whoever takes those seats. And I can say, hey, we need some help with this. We need to figure out a way to get rid of the tariffs. We need a way to get lumber in here quicker and lower cost. Because right now, $8 for a 2x4, it's $1 a linear foot. It's like carpet prices for framing wood. You know, it used to be 50 cents. That's a lot of money. Especially when you start talking 2x10s, 2x12s, and 12-footers, 30-footers, and, you know, he's over here going like, yeah, man, LVLs, the cost has gone through the roof. Let's talk about land. I sat down with Terry last week when we were planning this, and all of a sudden, like usual, we went down a rabbit hole. We started talking about local zoning. Local zoning. When was the last time our local zoning laws were addressed? She said it was back when she was on the board, which was 1 decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. Trying not to age you. 30 years. 30 years ago was the last time we looked at that. More than 35. Woof. 35 years ago was the last time those things. How much has advanced in the last 35 years? We only allow so many rooms per square mile, so many houses per lot. That, back when we had people doing just leach fields, or not even leach fields, just those cesspools where they dug a hole and they lined it with wood and they shot a tube into it. Yeah, that's what they were using back then. My in-laws just replaced their septic because they had one of those until 3 years ago. If you've got a cesspool, yeah, man, you need to spread out. That's gross. You're going to destroy our watershed. If we're using leach fields and new technology, why shouldn't we address that at a local level and take a look at how densely packed we can put houses? That's a local level solution that we need to lead and talk to our selectmen, talk to our individuals and say, is this still good? Is this still bad? And I'm not saying that it is or isn't. I don't know. I haven't sat down and talked to the selectmen specifically about this. But it's a thought, it's a question. And that's what we need to do, is we need to bring in ideas. So there's another piece. Let's talk about land. We stole our land. It sounds horrible, but the individual who had it was trying to build a road through, and the selectmen said, no, you can do $1 million mile if you're going to do that, which was a good idea because the town would have ended up taking care of that neighborhood. So he was stuck with a piece of landlocked land up on Dundee Road, and it was full of big rocks, and nobody thought it was worth building on. So we got it for less than 30 grand for 2 acres. We're talking $160,000 worth of property for less than 30 grand. Cool. Where are you finding that now? Where can you find land like that now? You can't. You can't. You start looking to areas that have common use and reserves and preserves where they've done tax abatement. So I've got 1,000 acres right here, and I only live on 2 of it. That other, 998 acres is locked into a super low tax rate. The town isn't collecting any funding on it. You know, this is a huge issue when you start going west on 302, or you go south into Freedom, or into lower parts of Ossipee in the southern part of Carroll County. How do we free up some of that land? You can free it up, but you have to pay all the back taxes. That's buku bucks. That is cost prohibitive. Maybe there's a way, and I'm saying maybe there is a way. Anybody who tells you this is the way, you know, this isn't the Mandalorian, man. This is no, we gotta go down and have the conversations. You've got to talk to the people and figure out what works for you. Is this feasible? Big budgeting office. Can we do this? Heck no. Okay, next plan. That's why you have to have plans in depth. So we've talked about land, we've talked about construction costs. We've talked about rentals. Let's talk about the market. The market right now is insane. And this is going to create a secondary ripple. It already is. People are buying homes sight unseen for tens of thousands of dollars over asking price because we are a primary place they want to be. That's great for us. We're here. We love it here. We want to keep it like it is. But when somebody offers $300,000 for a $200,000 house, I can't compete with that. People are like, man, you should sell your house. You'd make 600 grand. And I'm like, yeah. And then I'd be homeless because there's nowhere to buy. The local houses are staying on the market for 19 days, according to an ad that Badger Realty just put in the paper last week, or 2 weeks ago. 19 days. When we first moved back, we moved into a condo over on West Side Road. It took us over 6 months to sell that condo. 19 days. If you don't have money in hand, pre-approval, cash, ready to go, you can't get into a house. So the concept of affordable housing is a huge issue. This is blocking the progress of all of our business growth. One of the questions I had to answer recently is, of these three things, what do you think is the biggest impact on New Hampshire's economy? And guess what? They didn't list housing as one of them. And I sort of shook my head and said, now they got a housing question down here. I'll address it there. But man, people were like, it's housing, it's housing, it's housing. And they're right. It's housing. Terry and I were talking at that same conversation. 50% was what we're at. 50% of the normal employees is what you've got. You've got 50% of your spots open. We've got a $15 starting wage for a dishwasher. $15 for a dishwasher, and we can't fill it. I talked to Mike Mallet. He had a new hire come in. He's going to be a manager. The wife was a teacher. They both had to turn down those positions after they had taken them because they didn't find housing. They couldn't find housing. So how do we grow an economy? How do we keep an economy running if we can't keep people employed? If we can't find employees to put in? So when we start looking at affordable housing, we need to look at the supply immediately and find a way to increase long-term rentals. We need to find a way to control, but controlling cost in a free market is hard. So what do? All right, affordable housing. And people hear, oh my God, affordable housing, it's gonna be a project, and it's like, stop right there. So the last hurdle that I'm gonna talk about that we need to overcome is prejudice. Woo! Prejudice. NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard. Forget it, not in my backyard. We've got to get rid of that. Because not in my backyard means your neighbor doesn't have a place to stay once their rent is up and the owner decides to turn it into a short term. NIMBY means that your school teacher has to leave and go to a different district, that teacher that you love, because they can't get housing. We need to get over NIMBY, and we need to get over this thought in our mind that affordable means slum. Affordable doesn't mean slum. Affordable actually has a meaning. Words have meaning. Affordable means that it's not going to exceed X amount of price. And how do we encourage individuals to develop those? Like I said, we address some of the local issues with zoning. We figure out places to be able to get access to land to build them. We figure out ways to increase the amount of long-term rentals, and hopefully with more long-term rentals, this will become less of a crunch and the demand will come down a little bit. But there is no single silver bullet. We need to address this in depth, and we need to address it collaboratively. Not a Republican solution, not a Democrat solution, a New Hampshire solution. And that's my concept on that.